The world won't understand you. Hey, but it's okay. Said the world won't understand you. Cause I made you in my own way. Said the world won't understand you. Cause I made you different.
Hey, what's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 73 of In a Good Way podcast. It's the first episode of the new year of 2024. So, I'm really happy to be here. I just wanted to share, if you read the title, this one says for men, right? Self-care, healing, so on and so forth, right? I'm not sure exactly what I'm titling it, but I know I'm putting for men and then self-care and all that stuff, right? So if you stumbled across this channel because of the title and the algorithm or something, this is a spiritual channel, right? But the first half, I'm going to talk about normal people stuff, and then we'll get into the spiritual stuff if you want to stick around. If that's a little too much, too heavy, then then at least just you could get what you need to get out of the first half. All right. So to jump into it, I believe it was January 4th or so, I went to get my first massage, right, that I've ever gotten, right? But more specifically, I looked for a spiritual massage, right? So it wasn't just the massage. I wanted the whole kind of healing. Thanks to me having this podcast, I've had, a few sessions with a remote healer. If you're not familiar with that, it may be a little hard to grasp, but I could testify that it works, right? That's all I could say. I had a few sessions with Jane Fecto, who I forgot what episode it was, right? But she's what you call an intuitive healer, right? But she's been doing it for over 20 years, right? So like I said, if you're not familiar with all that, like the spiritual aspects, then that might be a little too much for you to grasp. But all I could say is that it worked, right? I was in pain with the sciatic pain. It at least got like 50% better, right? But there was still other things, right? But anyway, so since I had already experienced that, I wanted to go to an actual massage. Even when I was telling people, they were like, "Oh, you never been to a massage?" And some even recommended like other kind of massages, which wasn't my interest, right? I wanted to get a massage for the spiritual healing as well, right? So that's what I looked for, and I went to a masseuse. But let me tell you why I did it. So I had an interview. I forgot, it was one of the recent interviews, right? I think it was 68 maybe or something like that, episode 68, where I interviewed Patrice Christoph Fiak. I believe I'm pronouncing it. Well, let's just say Patrice, right? I interviewed Patrice. He recently messaged me that he did an interview and he sent it to me, but it was still unlisted, right? And Patrice talked about when he went to get his massage, and the lady happened to be a healer in France or somewhere out there, right? Like that's one of the things that gave him his spiritual awakening. It was like a life-changing experience. And he talked about how, even as men, right? I'll put a link. I don't know if he talked about it in the interview I did with him. He probably did, but we talked about so many things that, I'll put the link. And if not, then I'm sure you can find one of his other interviews where he does talk about it. But he talked about how this was a transformative experience and how men, we don't do that. And I'm living proof, right? Because obviously when I talk to people, a lot of people had gotten massages and things like that. I can honestly say, like, even in relationships, I never had someone, "Hey, let me give you a massage," or nothing like that. And it's, it is what it is, right? It doesn't bother me at this point, right? But I had never really taken that kind of self-care, right? Even when I did things in a spiritual sense that helped me a lot, right? Like I easily gravitated towards the native culture, where I would go to like sweat ceremonies or other kind of ceremonies. But even in these, right, like when I would go to sweat ceremonies, more than half of the time I would be also like, like part of the ceremony in a way too, right? So I would be like a firekeeper, right? So I would also be expending energy, and that always helped me. I always had to be doing something physical just to calm down, right? So even that, I've never really just had something where I'm just like, boom, like, hey, like take care of me. You know what I mean? Like you kind of in a way, I guess, surrender to this thing where you're just in a full state of relaxation, right? Uh, because even in the sweat, right? Like in the sweat, you're kind of, to me, like, right, like it's even like that battle, right? It gets hot at one point, and then you're like, trying to focus on your prayer and intentions and the reason you're in this ceremony. And sometimes, yeah, when it gets really hot, like you're still not fully just like in that state of boom. You know what I mean? So I mean, some people do, right? Like I've been in sweat ceremonies where people knock out, right? Like I mean, I think I've even gotten to that point, after, right? But like I said, since I've always been really immersed in the ceremony where I'm even helping. I've never really just been able to like knock out where like I've even heard people snoring or stuff like that, right? But all that aside, like yeah, so the massage, right? I never really got in a massage, so I went, but I still wouldn't have gone if a few days before New Year, I think I was out and about, and I had this I had my camera with me, and I wanted to get this shot, right? But I didn't have my tripod. It was muddy, the ground was muddy, so I was like, man, I'm not gonna put my camera on the ground, but there was this rock that happened to be, I guess since it had rained, it was clean on top. So I grabbed this big old kind of boulder rock, and when I lifted it up, it was kind of there was a little hill. So, I lifted it up already at an angle, and then I felt my back, right? Because my feet weren't firmly planted. I felt it in my back. I was like, that was stupid. So I put down the thing and I got my shot and everything, used the rock as a tripod. But then, the next day I still went on a hike. And then the next day I still went on a mountain bike ride. So then by the next day after that, my back was killing me, right? It was like, oh man, I really messed up. I should have let my back rest. So because that happened, it forced me I was like, you know what? Like Patrice had sent me that thing. He mentioned that he had already planted the seeds. I was already thinking, okay, I need to, why not start the year fresh, start the new year completely letting go of stuff, even if there's any that's why I look for a spiritual healer. So not just the massage, but any residual energy, anything, just let it go. Boom. That's what I was expecting. So I found a healer. I went, a masseuse, also slash healer. I went, and I knew like I didn't want to put this responsibility on them because I knew I went already hurt, right? So that's why I didn't make the video right after I went. It's been a few days, right, since I went to get the massage. So I didn't want to put that on them, right? Because I knew, because after I did feel I felt sore, but I knew that was normal, right? Because, I was already hurt, right? Now I feel good. Now I'm not in pain. So now I wanted to make this, right? But even that, it was a great experience. I understood. Maybe it wasn't as life transformative for me as it was for Patrice because, like for him, it gave him the spiritual awakening, right? But for me, it was meant to, I was guided. First of all, like, so now we might get into the spiritual thing. I just wanted to touch on that, right? Like, I guess, let me finish off that whole thought of for men, right? Like me, I'm one of those that I've never gone there. I've never done this self-care stuff. So I haven't drank for 8 years. So I was thinking, even for New Year's, I was going to go drink. I already had it in my head. And then the night before New Year's, I had this dream. I get to a place and there's this drunk woman, her titties are literally out. Like she's all, and it ended up looking like a comedy from a TV show, right? Because as we get there, me and this other woman, I didn't even know who she was in the dream. And we get there and we're looking at her and she's just all like, it was like, oh man, I know we had that look, and she even looks at us, and that's where she's like, it was almost like a fine then, like, she's like, I need to call my sponsor or whatever. And it was like, that would be in a TV show where you hear that laughter in the background, right? It was like that, like, it was just on cue, like, funny. But when I woke up, I knew, like, man, do I really want to go get, I mean, I haven't drank in so long, maybe I would have ended up getting to that point where it's just like, all belligerent on, like, nasty, and I was like, yeah, you know what? So since I didn't spend any money on New Year's, that was my way of treating myself, right? Well, what's better? Like, even when I used to drink, right? You wake up and you feel you know, you damage your body. Really, you're putting poison into your body. So, and it's fine. Like if you want to drink, I got no problem with it. I did it so well for so long, right? But it's been 8 years, and I think that was just, if you don't want to believe in the spiritual, then whatever. Your subconscious telling you, like, do you really want to be like this? You know, because we do have the answers, right? As human beings, we have this thing already inside of us that guides us in the right direction. So this was my little compass trying to tell me, since I wasn't getting it in the physical world, trying to tell me in the spirit world, like, hey, do you really want to do this? You know, so because I did it, and I was like, all right, you know what? Because, you know, work's barely picking up. So I was like I didn't really want to spend the money, but if I hadn't gotten injured, I probably wouldn't have. So I went and did it because of that, right? So I was like, oh, you know what? Let me do this for myself. So that's the whole point. Like, if you're like me and you've never gotten that, I will recommend doing it. Absolutely. Uh, it was it was a great feeling to just be there and have that, like, right, like feel taken care of, right? Feel taken care of in that way, especially if you've never, not that I've never had anyone that didn't make me food or this or that, right? Like, so it's not like I'm not gonna bash on any relationships I had in that way, because I definitely had people that were very attentive and nurturing in that way, right? But I had never gotten that massage, and even in ways like you know, just that, right? Like, it's a very vulnerable place to be in, because you're basically trusting someone. So that, even that on a spiritual level, it kind of like I said, letting go of any past traumas or stuff like that. Like, I had to have trust in this person, right? And so, you know, I guess I'm kind of leaning now towards the spiritual. So I think I'm gonna break off into the spiritual. So hopefully, I'm really trying to cover this, like, I guess for people that probably will get freaked out by the spiritual, of trying to cover it. Just as men, we fail to do that. Like I was saying, yeah, like my self-care was always climbing up a mountain, going to the gym, doing this, doing that, right? There's always a physical aspect to that, and it's just never been where you just kind of surrender to life, right? Because you see, right, even when I was young, thanks to Tupac, really, you know, I was still a teenager when I started looking up statistics, and even that, it was because I think I was already going through stuff. And you know, I probably had you know, I can't even hide it because I wrote it in songs. When I was young, I had, you know, little suicidal thoughts here and there, right? So I looked up the statistics for some weird reason. And I, even when I was young, a teenager, I saw that double the people in the United States were taking their own life than were getting murdered, right? And back then there was already gangs and all this violence and this and that. But even that, the fact that double the people took their own life than were getting murdered was freaky to me. So I was like, oh wow. And it helped me like take those thoughts away. So I wanted to beat that. I didn't want to be that statistics. I was like that's freaking insane. Why is this? Why are more people taking their own than, you know, that? But then fast forward, the reason I bring that up, fast forward to be now a days where double the men. So if it was that, and now to find out that double the men take their own life than women, right? So for every, or just about, it's real close. Like, so, you know, for every 100 women that took their life, 200 men took their life, right? So if it's 100 women took their life, 200 men took their life. So all these things that are obviously wrong with men, right? So I thought this was an important aspect about how we don't um take care of ourselves, right? And so for me, I guess there's a lot of things I want to say, because it was a kind of like it almost, we had that that confidentiality, right? Like I was able to just, I was like, hey, I want to heal, so let me just, whatever I gotta say, and she was cool with it, right? So I mean, you know, obviously, so it was cool to be paying not only for like a masseuse, but also like, all right, you're gonna be my therapist today. I've never even been a therapist, right? Like only once for like something, but that doesn't pertain to like this, right? I actually went because somebody wanted me to go, and then so I did it, and that was it, right? And then it was like, all right, uh, what do you call it? And they actually gave me that advice to get rid of that person. So it was kind of, you know, interesting, right? I think it backfired on what that person had intended, right? So it was pretty funny. Now in hindsight, right? I didn't want to talk because I never wanted to get like the therapist in trouble because I know they weren't supposed to tell me that, but I'm grateful that they were honest and definitely helped me right in that way because not most people wouldn't have done that, right? Or risking their own, whatever. So, anyways, um, so in this case, that's what it helped also, right? This masseuse also gave me that space. So see, they didn't, I'm sure they didn't have to do that, but they gave me that space, I guess because of the spiritual aspect, right? Like in a way you get what you paid for. This is what I was looking for. So that's why this service was provided to not just have a massage, but also have that. All right, let's dive into what, because the spiritual, or however you want to call it, if you don't believe, just whatever's in there buried deep will translate to physical pains, right? So that was the point of the whole thing. Let's really get to the root of, if you're hurt, well, what's the real reason you're hurt, right? Like if you got this pain here and there, and I had already been studying that for some time. Like when I would get certain pains that didn't make sense, it'll be like, all right, I'm feeling this pain, but this doesn't even make sense. So I started looking up even years and years ago, like, okay, spiritual meaning of feeling this pain, spiritual meaning of why is my foot all of a sudden hurting? I didn't even do nothing, like nothing at all for my foot to be hurting. Why is my knee hurting? Why is this, that? You know what I mean? So there were things that I had already been studying for years. So the fact that that was like one of the first things she told me, I loved it, right? I was like, all right, cool. Like I'm in the right place, right? So, we were able to open up about a lot of things. And so, I guess that's what I will recommend. Like if you're a little afraid of the spiritual, then maybe just start off with a massage, right? Go get a massage, go to a place you trust that you could just surrender and just let it go, right? Breathe. Even that, right? Like I never really do the breath work. And so that was one of the first things, right? She started with the breath work, doing all that. And so by the time I got to the massage table, because I am someone, so now we're gonna get into the spiritual. I think I covered enough about the things of why it's important to for men, us as men. And I think, like I said, right, it's always a physical aspect to it. Like I said, even because they've even done studies where like native ceremonies have been more beneficial to like even people with PTSD or stuff like that, where going to psychologists and this and that didn't even help them. Oh, well, let me just touch on this last part. For example, right, with native sweat ceremonies, the way I was taught by an elder was that they were created for men, right? Women already naturally had, their moon time, right? Every 28 days they had their self purification. That's what this whole the menstrual cycles are, right? Like a woman already had her own purification every month, right? So we as humans really need that. But for men, there was no way for us to purify in that way, right? So when we go, the sweat is literally like we're entering the womb, right? So that was before it. So anyone that follows the Christian religion, this is kind of like where it seems like, it was hijacked, right? That being born again, because literally for indigenous people, native people, when we would go into the sweat ceremony, the temescal, as we're going inside, like we're re-entering the womb and we come out born again, right? And we're literally like sweating out all the toxins, everything that you have. But not just that, if you're aware and you're able to go in there spiritually and let go of everything, right? Even it's like in the middle, the the grandfathers, which are burning hot. It's like even that, right? Like where you're letting the fire take care of whatever you had, whatever burdens you had, or whatever, you're letting the fire take that away from you, right? So it is a chance to be born again every single time you go in a ceremony, right? So that's where that comes from, right? But so that's why it was created, right? It was a chance for men, and of course it became co-ed and everything because all this and that, right? But there's even a lot of tribes where there's some that don't care now, right? Everything has changed now, but the traditional way was, normally women wouldn't go into a ceremony when they were on their moon time because that's like a ceremony inside of a ceremony, right? This is the way I was taught. Again, different tribes are different ways, right? But so this is like even that, right? So that's why in a way I believe it was a lot more beneficial, even for me, right? It was a no-brainer. Like instead of, I needed more than just this church situation, right? Like to be immersed in this, like in the in the native ways, and maybe it called out to me, right, in my DNA, right? Uh, so that changed my life, right, and it helped me. But see, this is what happened after during the pandemic. They stopped having ceremonies, right? Because the fear got even, of course, well, not the fear, right? I'm not gonna say nothing in any negative kind of way, right? Like everyone was cautious, right? I was definitely cautious being around my parents and everything, stuff like that. Like I never wanted to make sure, be out there and then come bring something, right? So I took all the proper precautions too. So of course, within all the native cultures, most of them stopped having ceremonies, or at least the ones that I had access to, right? The ceremony stopped. I still try to go out in nature, even though they were putting like, oh, nobody allowed in the park. I would still go on my hikes because I like no one's here. Like sometimes I would run into one person, right? When I was in the mountains or whatever, you know. And during that time, we'd cover our mouths while we're passing each other, all that crazy stuff that was going on, right? But I lost access to the ceremonies and other things, right? No gym anymore, no this, and you try to work out and do other things, but I didn't have that ability to, and that's when I had my first panic attacks, my first this, my first that, right? So there was a lot of things that I lost access to, right? So even now, right, the ceremony that I have access to is kind of far. So, I still have had, like I said, certain pain, so I can't always drive out there. And so this was very important for me, right? Getting this massage, and of course I plan on getting more, and hopefully next time, because like I said, I didn't want to talk about my experience. I didn't want to talk about my experience right after that because I knew I went in with pain. I wasn't going to put all this pressure on someone like, oh, you're supposed to heal me because I went in there already with pain, right? I knew it was almost like there was a purpose. Oh, yeah. Okay. So now we'll get into the spiritual part, right? So when I got there was like so many signs that I was meant to be there. Because let me tell you, so anyone that knows now gets the freaky part, right? Like, so I do have these abilities, right? I can see things. And now, like, I don't want to use the word psychic. I'm gonna have to find another word than psychic, but right, like I have those gifts, right? So I had seen this woman before I even went. I had seen this woman like fighting, right? And in my whatever you want to call it, third eye, my thing, they showed me this, and I was like, am I gonna get there and something? So I was already treading lightly, right? Like okay, I'm just gonna not say nothing or something. I'm gonna get there. Like I don't want like this woman to. Why did I see her fighting? That was weird, right? But when I get there after the whole massage thing, I think it was till after the massage, she reveals that she competed. I believe kickboxing. Yeah, I believe it was kickboxing, and she even fought professionally. So I was like, okay, now boom, the light bulb. Okay, it made sense. That's why I saw her like fighting, but I just didn't know. I was like, because I was asking, I prayed about it. Is that do I go? Like, do I not? Like, I always do that check, right? Like, am I supposed to go here? Because I seen this lady trying to fight, like, and it looked like I was like, is she trying to fight with me or what? Like, but anyways, once I got there were so many signs on the way there, and even after we were talking about something, and she said something, and she's like, oh, watch, I gotta show you something. And then she shows me, I was like, dude, no way. And then I'm like, okay, oh, I forgot, I gotta show you this. So it was like all these synchronicities, like as I was going, and then she showed me. So it was like, okay, I was meant to be there. And then after it was revealed, there was all these spiritual connections. But let me tell you, like when I was getting the massage, I started having so many visions, like because I really like surrendered to the I don't even want to call it an experience because that doesn't even kind of sound just for like this the healing, right? So maybe that for like during the process of this healing, it almost felt like a ceremony. I kind of more want to call it during this massage ceremony more like it sounds like a more just term. I start having all these visions, and I love that she was aware of that because I was already made aware of that. How see in our culture, modern day culture, we teach that everything's here and blah blah blah, all this stuff, and I definitely have to not blame, right, but say religions have something to do with that, right, of causing so much, like making us lose so much touch of what we're capable of, our connections spiritually, all these things, right? Like religion definitely has had a hand in dumbing us down, right? Or disconnecting us from our gifts, from our connection to the earth, all these things, our ability to self-heal, so many things, right? Uh, I don't want to say modern science, because the modern science, I think, is now realizing, right? Maybe for their sense of losing everybody, and oh wait, everyone's starting to go this way. Just kind of like when the fast food places were like, oh, now we offer healthy stuff, right? So I don't know if it's an actual pureness why they're doing it, or just like oh, we don't want to lose out on this, so they're like starting to now be open to the spiritual as well, right? Like the modern science, but the old modern science veered us away from that as well, right? So, anyways, damn, what was the point? I went way too out there. So, oh yeah, I was happy that she was able to mention about how that in a past life, like maybe at the same age, did I get my leg chopped off, and then now I'm feeling it in this life, and all this stuff, right? And I was already aware. I think we even talked about that, in the interview with Patrice again, right? So I'll put a link to that interview below. But anyways, we're talking about that, right? How old wounds could resurface, and it's just like an acknowledging. It's just an acknowledging and letting go, right? Like, oh damn. And so when I was there, so I could talk about I can't talk about anything. I opened the door for her if she wants to come be a guest on, right? But obviously it's on her. Like if she accepts the invitation, then we'll do that interview, and I'm sure she has so much knowledge to share, being a healer, right? And being in this environment. I'm sure she has tons of stories and things like that, right? But I don't want to share them because as a respect, right? So if she accepts the invitation, then I'll interview her, maybe one of the next interviews or something. So anyways, that old wounds could be resurfacing. And that was one thing, right? Like for me, I had been having dreams about old battles and this and that for a long time, until I met my psychic friend that was like, oh, I see you in all these past lives and all these battles, and then I had already been dreaming about that. So I was like, oh wow, that's what that was. Because sometimes I thought, like, is this something that's coming? Like, is there gonna be these huge wars and this and that? And man, why do I keep dreaming about all these different battles, right? And so even that came out while I was getting the massage. I started seeing all these old battles, right? And even that, when I was in the Tyler, and then she's like, no, like don't second guess it. Like what you saw is what you saw, right? So I was like, yeah, no, I did see, like, so even that, I don't know if some of my pains had been tied into these past lives, and so there was a lot of that, having to let go of things from past lives, like if I was wounded in past lives or different things like that, right? Like, or just karmic things that you got to pay from past lives. They're not a part of this life no more. So to let them go, right? Like let go of these past life things. So I was able to surrender to that, and I had all these visions just do popping in. Ancient things, clearly from ancient times, this and that. Seeing like these body armors that were obviously like from old times. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So there was a lot of that, and so I definitely go do it again. Like it was a great way to start the year. Once my pain went away, yeah, I feel like definitely lighter. That's why I wanted to talk about it. Uh, before I didn't. So, obviously, whoever watches this, I put like for men, because this is something men aren't very. Even that, I have so many friends that normally, like most of my conversations about spiritual stuff happen to be with women, right? Not a lot of men. Like you almost, like when I have certain friends, I'll be talking, it's almost like the deer in the headlights, right? Some could follow along, but I mean, they have to be already involved, like in the spiritual, right? But a lot of times when I'll talk to friends about like the spiritual, they'll give me that deer in the headlights look, and I just like, okay, boom. But I'm good at doing that. I could switch back to, okay, let me say something that's more relatable to them, right? So usually my deep spiritual conversations, unless it's a medicine man or someone that is aware, then I could talk to men about these conversations, right? Like really going in deep. So yeah, even that, right? Because I did have a lot of things that I had gone through with women. It was important to be in that space, right? Where a woman's performing this healing on you because of those traumas, right? Because of those traumas, right? Like a lot of times, because I don't really want to make this too long, right? But my whole life I had kind of played that role, right? And I didn't mind because I saw it early on. I was like, wow, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like I heal. It was almost like picture it. Like when I was thinking about it, it's almost like in my head if I saw that, like me, and there's just a line of broken women like coming to me, like, and not in any kind of like that way, right? Like just almost like that, like in the spirit world, there was like me, like, you know, having like a little shop, dusting it off, and then just hitting that, oh, clicking the open thing, like, and then just a line, like if they would find me, right? Like no matter where, somehow, like any woman that had some kind of broken situation, like finding me, right? But in that aspect, I never got anything back, right? It'd be like boom, broken woman number one, and then they go, live their life, and then broken woman number two, and then they go live their life. Broken woman number three. Sometimes it could be just a 1 day thing. Boom, I met, and not it like again, not in that way. I'm talking about just the meeting. They dump all their stuff, boom, and then boom. But then as and at least see before whether I had working out or ceremony, something I could go discharge all that energy. So over the last years, when all that energy just started building up and people were still, because I even noticed that, right? And not just women, I guess men too, right? Like I noticed that right after I had my big, what I call the worst day of my life when my brother passed away in 2019. I remember the first two calls I got, and one was a man, and they called me and they talked for, I remember looking at the phone, right? They called me for and it was funny. I was sitting on the side of a cliff, like, almost like that, like a hawk or an eagle perched. I don't know why the light got so bright, but it was like a hawk or an eagle perched, right? And just watching over boom everything, right? Sitting because my brother had just passed away within, I don't even think a week had passed. And a friend calls me and they're talking, and then like an hour, 10 minutes after they finally stopped talking, and they asked me, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, my brother passed away. And they're like, oh, I feel bad now, or this and that. Cool, you know. But I realized, and then the next call I got was a woman, and she talked for like 40 something minutes. And then it was like, oh, how are you doing? Oh, my brother passed away. Oh, da-da-da-da. And then I realized, like, damn, this is what I've been for people. But I never cared because I always had somewhere to vent, right? But during this time, like, you know, after like, well, because it happened the year before the pandemic, right? So even that, after that happened, I guess it just opened my eyes to how open I was to people. And I never really had, right? Because it's like people will come dump everything, men or women, and then I would provide that because that is healing, right? You're letting someone vent, like you're healing someone in that they needed that at that moment, and you just provided that. But then you got to let that go somewhere, right? So before I had so after my brother passed away, I didn't feel like writing any more songs. And the ones that I did were like after, right? I did them, that was part of like my healing process, right? But yeah. So anyways, all these things, right? So massages again, I don't know where I was going with that, right? Just that, I guess, for so long I had provided healing for so many people, hundreds of people over the years that, and I would notice that, right? Because once it comes time, like, I even had someone I think this happened after my brother passed away, when they were like, oh, I always thought, like, I thought you were the one person I could this and that. And I was just like, at that moment too, it clicked, like, you were. And I never got nothing back. It was like someone just kept taking from the well, never poured a bucket back. Not one bucket, boom, right? Like just kept taking from the well, right? So at that moment, I realized, like, even at that, right? So then I cut off everybody. I went into this whole, I guess, you know, this thing where I was just I became closed off, and this all my healing thing, so I had to go through all these things, right? And so now this was important for me to have someone providing that healing service to me. Um, Even though there's still like a fair exchange in a way, right? For me, it was me paying and then them providing this service, uh, this healing service, right? So I think I'll leave it there. I don't want to go on off into anymore. I think I've covered what I wanted to cover, right? Really, I could have just said that and just cut the video, right? For men, it's important to have a place to release whatever you need to release, right? And again, I'm not talking about like just because that, right? Like I've always done it in that physical way, right? Like, but I've never really just allowed for someone to like in that nurturing way, right? When I was young and I'd end up in the hospital, I loved the hospital. I know now why. Now it makes sense because yeah, 9 times out of 10, it was a woman nurse, or probably for me, I think every time it was a woman nurse that I could remember, but they would always be so nurturing, right? In the like that's funny because actually along someone that I knew for a long time, they were actually a nurse, right? And so they have something about like that nurturing kind of thing, right? Um, what do you call it? So that I think I like being in hospitals. Most people are afraid of hospitals. I actually like being in the hospitals when I was a kid because I had that very nurturing, like you're there, or not just a kid, but like even when I was younger and I would go to the hospital. Actually, when I was a kid, shit, I think I was always in the damn hospital. Like every year something would happen that I'd be in the hospital for a little bit. And that nurturing thing, bringing you food, being very nice, right? Always very nice. Are you okay? The temperature good? You need a pillow, this, blah, 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 all that, right? So it was like having that happen, right? Uh, and it's okay, it's like an investment. If you're going through something and you're feeling all stuck or this and that, go get a massage. Maybe it'll be what you needed and you'll feel rejuvenated, right? Like Patrice's experience, like how he said, was life altering, right? Because it even gave him, like, I think he mentioned it, so I don't want to quote him wrong, but like a spiritual awakening in a sense. So maybe it'll provide the same for you. For me, it definitely gave me that sense of, because I always thought you have to hold on to things from like past lives. Like it helps you. I guess it does help you remember who you are and maybe help you guide you as to why you're doing this life, right? Why you're in this life this time. But for me, it's almost like it's not serving me in this life. And for me, I gotta let go of things from past lives. I've already been shown who I was in past lives and this and that. For the most part, maybe there's a few things I still need to figure out, like from the past lives, because I've been shown very, very deeply like of things, right? So maybe there's certain things I still gotta figure out, but for the most part, that's kind of what that was, a purging of even going into that, right? Like quantum connections, I guess, is what it's called, or could be referred to, right? Like as things from other lifetimes and stuff, or maybe even simultaneously other realities at the same time, right? So, but I won't get on into that now. Let me end it. All right, peace. Thank you for joining me on the first episode of the In a Good Way podcast, episode 73. Again, thank you to everybody. I'm grateful that you've stuck with me, or if you're new, that you found me, and hopefully you'll stick around. I do have a goal in mind, right? I know I want to get up to episode 100, and after that, if I'm called to continue, then I will. But if not, then I'm gonna leave them up. You'll have 100 episodes and all the other videos I've made, and we'll see from there. You know what I mean? But thank you once again, and hope your 2024. If you want to start it off good, you might want to consider doing a little self-care, right? All right, peace.
Life may move fast, or it may move slow. I met a silly man who said he make it slow. We look up out towards space, or even at the sky. One that gets away, but never look inside. Breathe in, breathe out. Life is a maze, but we'll figure this out. I mean, human beings, I ain't got no doubt.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes you just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You just feeling it. And I want to feel this way forever.
Feel this way forever.